one trying to live up to others' expectations. Family, society, class, race, sex, or religions. It's time to break free from the isms that make us feel like we're in prison. I'm ready to be unleashed as fuck. I'm ready to be unleashed as fuck. Tired of the madness, done with the sadness. Gonna break free and be unleashed.
Hey, ambitious ones. We are Unleashed AF. And we have some useful shit for you today. Today we're diving into hypnotherapy for self-worth, subconscious blocks to confidence. We're going to talk about how the blocks get there, why they can be so strong, and how to overturn them. I'm Deidre Beecham, visibility catalyst and recovering nice girl. In my search for truth, I left a religious cult, came out of my closet, and left a rather soul-sucking 20-year marriage. After 27 months, not right after, but later, 27 months, I shattered my nice girl training, reclaimed my power voice, and built a life on my terms. And now I help soulful women to do the same in a fraction of the time.
And I'm Jenny Badig, hypno coach and human factors engineer. I empower people to tap into their subconscious superpowers, to be used for good, of course, and achieve their full potential. And welcome to Unleashed AF, the podcast where we help you own your greatness and unleash your authentic self. Enjoying our shows? Be sure to like, share, follow, subscribe, all those social media verbs, which who knows, may be changing soon based on the shifting social media platforms.
Oh gosh, it's been wild, hasn't it?
Yeah, but we also have, of course, our website, unleashedafpodcast.com. You can go there and leave us a comment or question, or if you have any suggestions for future topics or segments on our shows, you can go to WWJDD on that website, which is What Would Jenny and Deidre Do? Just fill out that form and let us know what you think. Awesome. We do this podcast for you guys, and we love hearing from you.
We do. And a look at last week's episode, just in case you didn't watch, for shame. We talked about how to find your power voice. If you're not sure what that is or how to get it, go on back to last week's episode. Check it out. It's currently available on YouTube and Facebook at Unleashed AF.
Right. It'd be episode 38 because we're in episode 39 today.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. So let's take a look in the last week. It's so funny. We get together on Mondays and talk about what we're going to say happened during the week. And there was already one big announcement, so we put it down. We always leave space. Whew, was it a week? Was it a week? The first one, let's go ahead. What was the first one that we found, Jenny?
Yeah, the first one that had come up. So at this point, it seems old news with everything else that's happened this week.
It seems like it was a month ago that this announcement was.
We're like, didn't we talk about this already?
No,
so the big news was that Pope Francis of the Catholic Church, obviously Roman Catholic, made an announcement that gay men could be priests now. But the only caveat to that is they would still need to remain celibate, just as straight male priests supposedly do.
Mm-hmm.
So on the one hand, this is a huge kind of move towards inclusivity in the church.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there were so many comments I saw where people were like, so who, like, there've been so many controversies and scandals in the church with priests, are like, who's actually celibate anymore? Like, so many of them gotten in trouble. Well, why would the gay guys have to stay celibate? The straight ones don't.
At least from a story standpoint and a legality standpoint, it is a step in the right direction.
Yes.
I don't know that coming from the Catholic Church is the place necessarily where we need it from, but every little step counts and every little step helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it just went crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's all sorts of things we could talk about. We could talk about the hellscape of people that are coming through Congress right now, and it truly is a hellscape.
Hearings and
yes,
all that happiness. Yeah.
But I want to point out a couple of things. We want to point out a couple of things, a couple more things that happened. One with Facebook. This is a big. This is really, in my opinion, this is really big. I'm on TikTok. I have been for a little while, not as long as a lot of people, but for a while, enough to understand what's happening over there. And oh my goodness. So Zuckerberg had spent quite a bit of money trying to get rid of TikTok. I mean, there's a lot of other people saying the government wants to get rid of it. There's all this fear about the Chinese having our data. Um, it, but everybody in the country seems to have everybody's data. So, and if, I'm sure if the Chinese wanted our data, they could have it. And that's kind of what people on TikTok are saying. They're like, well, what is the big deal? We've all been taught that our data is no big deal. And but Zuckerberg wants it gone because of the
It competes. It's a
yeah,
competitor.
it competes. But I realized one more thing that I forgot to mention while we were talking. The overriding theory. I mean, yes, I think that I know that that's definitely happened. The whole Zuckerberg thing with all the money he put forth trying to get rid of TikTok. But what we believe is the more prevailing theory, is that the government wants to get rid of it because of how quickly people on TikTok organize. People on TikTok organize so fast. We have affected stock prices. We have affected, well, stock prices is the big thing. In fact, we affected Kellogg's stock prices so much that Kellogg's was doing buy one, get one free cereals for a while in a bunch of stores because nobody would buy Kellogg's.
Wow.
So we have made a difference, and a lot of people have awakened to the racism that they hold inside themselves, and they're working on themselves. People have arranged all sorts of protests against the money that's gone to attack the Ukraine. And so there's a lot of people on TikTok that understand what's happening and have done a lot of organizing. And we think that that's why the government wants it shut down. And so people have gotten very, very organized and very, very, very aware. Well, in the meantime, Zuckerberg got more upset because TikTok was doing even better. And then there was more push against TikTok and saying, no, we're definitely shutting it down. We're cutting out all the other avenues. And so the populace in TikTok has gotten very upset, and so upset that they said, well, F you. We're heading over to China. That's where you don't want us to be. That's where you're so worried about getting our information. Well, you know what? We're going to go sign up on a Chinese app. So everybody signed up on this thing called, I think it's Little Red Book. I'm sorry, I did not learn the Mandarin for it before coming on the air. But so there's all these people that have gone over there. Zuckerberg's got really upset after that because what happened was Red Note became higher downloaded app than Facebook and became one of the highest downloaded apps. And then Zuckerberg went totally in with Trump, and he's going to be sitting with Trump and the cabinet with, say it's Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk. Completely unprecedented. The kingdom being sworn in and held right in front of us. And so the people on TikTok are like, fine, well, maybe we'll go and we'll get on a Russian app too. Maybe we'll go and learn another language. But what's really interesting is because all of this has happened, there's been a, it all started out of anger and, kind of a FU to government.
Mm-hmm.
But what it's turned into, Jenny, and what I think is so beautiful as a result of it is, one, there's more people that are wakening up to our government and how it mistreats us.
Mm-hmm.
Two, is that people have found out that, you know what? People in China are just people like us. and they're worried about us, and they care about us, and they have beautiful cities, and they have amazing little places that they live, and nobody is struggling. There's no homeless. You know why there's no homeless? Do you know this? You know there's no homeless in China?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
The reason is that once you reach the age of 60 or whenever their retirement age is, you get a pension from the rest of your life from the government. No homeless.
Mm.
If you don't have a home, the pension will pay it for you, unless you could have a family that has, because sometimes you may have a family that has a house and you can just go live in their house. So, an extra house. But yeah, there's no homeless because they take care of them.
Yeah. I mean, as much as crazy as this kind of seems right now, I can see the positive aspects of it potentially long
There
term.
are huge positive aspects to this. I think more has happened. Somebody said that more has happened over the past 48 hours than the government would have been able to do to bring our countries together in 3 years. It would take 3 years to do what we did in 2 days on TikTok. Now, I say we, but I didn't jump over to Red Note. But I know a lot of people who did, and I've been tracking it with rabid curiosity. It's so fascinating to me. It's such a fascinating time to be alive. Yeah, absolutely fascinating. And then Coke. Did you know about Coke? I know we talked about it briefly ahead of time. I don't know if I told you.
That was a new one to me too.
So evidently, I wish I could find the picture. Can you see if you can find the picture of it while I'm talking about this real quick? So evidently, Coca-Cola designed a Trump can. And earlier this week, I believe it was earlier this week, they delivered the new can to Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Did you happen to find it?
I see stuff, but not where it's a good enough picture.
Okay.
Like the can is too small to
Well,
really get a good shot of it.
If we find it, we'll throw it up on our page when we.
Yeah, if I drank Coke, I think I would throw it up.
So here's what's happening is, and we talked about this briefly before we got started, and what is happening, a lot of people thought, I was one of them, that the next war, whether it was a civil war or a world war or whatever altercation that would come, because of certainly it would be something bigger than January 6th. And of course, with the Project 2025 coming in, I mean, there's just a lot. And the thinking was that there would be this bloody war, right? This bloody altercation, this, people with their muskets, and that's not it. I truly believe so much of this is being fought digitally.
Oh, yeah.
It's being fought digitally. It's being fought spiritually, with people awakening and healing themselves and being kinder to other people. And there's so much going on. There's a lot of hate. But there's so much awakening happening right now. And it's just going to be a fascinating time if we can just hang in there and keep fighting the good fight as we get there. Yeah. Anyway, it's been a crazy week.
Yes. Crazier than I even realized, because I wasn't.
Oh, I lost your sound. Is that me?
I don't know.
I can't hear a thing. All right. I'm going to have to leave for a second because I can't hear you.
Okay. All right. And I'm working on uploading the picture that I found, which hopefully is the one she was talking about. Uh, That's not the right type. Mm. So, are you able to come in? All right. So, as she's working on getting her technical issues taken care of, I think we're ready to jump into this week's topic. So, this week we are talking about hypnotherapy for self-worth and the subconscious blocks to confidence. As we said earlier, we're going to talk about how the blocks get there. Oh, she's back.
So
Can
sorry.
you hear me now?
I can.
Okay.
I couldn't hear a thing. Okay. Okay. So sorry.
That's all right. I was just jumping into the topic.
Perfect.
Was there anything else that you wanted to say? I thought I found something about the Coke thing, but it was not the right format for me to upload. So
that's okay. That's okay.
All right. So we're talking about hypnotherapy for self-worth and the subconscious blocks to confidence. As we mentioned, we're going to talk about how those blocks get in our subconscious. Then we'll move on and talk about why they're so strong and then how to overcome them. So in terms of those blocks, as someone who has practiced hypnotherapy for a little over a decade now, I can tell you the vast majority of the blocks that we have in our subconscious got there at some point in our childhood. The vast majority of them. It's sort of like that, I don't know, poster or that saying that says everything you needed to learn, you learned in kindergarten. It's like all the foundational things that happen to us kind of get planted early in our lifetime in terms of how we see ourselves, the limiting beliefs, all those kinds of things almost always at least get started at that young age. So a big part of what we experience as a child is our family. So a lot of times it's related to things with our family, but it doesn't have to be.
What's crazy? Yeah. Well, what's crazy to me is some of the things that were implemented in your subconscious will be obvious, right? When you're starting to heal, I mean, you notice them, you know them. But sometimes even after you have healed through some of those things, it's also important to remember that there's probably other levels to it. So even though, and I just think this is important to be reminded of because it really threw me for a loop, that just because you've worked through something that was a subliminal message that you've worked through before, be aware that it is possible for that to come back as you go to new levels of healing. It's like these deeper tendrils. Mm-hmm. So you may think that you've eliminated this subliminal message from yourself, but when you go to a new level of height, new level of awareness, new level of growth, new level of healing, it can still come back. And I always like to remind people that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you, because you haven't fixed it. It's just always something there. You just get better and better at pushing past it or recognizing it.
It really is very similar in my mind to the weeds that you might find in your garden. You can go pull those weeds out, but it seems like there's always some little part of the weed that breaks off and stays in the ground and then reproduces and the weeds come back. It was so disappointing. I think the first time I used like a weed guard kind of thing, I'm like, I'm going to get all the weeds out, and I'm going to put the weed guard down, and I won't have any more weeds anymore. Nope. Not true. Those buggers still on the way to come up. Yeah. I mean, it's there because, or it surprises us sometimes. We don't realize they're still there because they are kind of buried in our subconscious where we can't really see them per se.
True, but I want to give you another side to it because I want to give you the side where I was coming from, because I have I still struggle with it. I have a perfectionist streak, and I have that perfectionist streak obviously from a childhood, always never thinking I was good enough. And so I have this perfectionist streak, and instead of just going out and just doing whatever. And I would work so hard at getting rid of some subliminal message. And then when it would come back, and, let's say I hadn't had it for, 3 months, I hadn't struggled with it at all. And then it pops up, or maybe it's been a year. What I would do is I would look at it as a failing. How can I possibly still have this problem? And it would be just devastating and tear me down. And then I think I'd feel embarrassed or ashamed to bring it up again. And shame is so deeply used in nice girl training and of course rules for polite society. So I just wanted to bring up that was my aspect of it. I was so ashamed. I had trouble bringing it up again. I think that's why I want to make sure I bring it up each time, is because I don't want you. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Anyway, please continue. I just wanted to share that side.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we're influenced by our family because that's who we're around the most when we're young like that. But obviously, there's also things from society or the culture that we're in that can influence us. Things like church, school, just the media, especially, when we were kids. I don't think we were as exposed to media as the kids today are, because there's so many kids today that have their own phones and they can have access to the internet and have exposure to all the same things that we have exposure to. It's just almost unending what kids today have access to or have to try to figure out how they fit into it or how it applies to them. And, there's so much more anxiety, I think, with kids today. And it could be because of that overwhelming sense of societal expectations and things like that they're exposed to that we didn't have as much back way before social media. So there's just so many different things that can influence it. And we even had a little talk about the different influences that could come even from the difference between like a public school and a private school upbringing, and what the expectations are there, or how they treat the students, what they expect of them, what they're encouraged by. Even that difference can make a huge difference in how people feel about themselves or what they feel they're capable of doing. And was there a specific example that you had about that, or something that you wanted to share in terms of public versus private school?
I did, and I don't remember what it was.
Well, you went to a private school, right? I think we were talking about, I was assuming that private schools were more supportive of the children in terms of you can do so much more because they're typically, private schools are tended more
that's
true. People that have
true.
money, and so therefore you can do whatever you want because you've got the resources. But you had a different perspective on that.
I think that's true, but there's so much shaming that happens in private schools, and I'm sure that happens in public schools as well. But I spent 4 years in a private school, 5th through 8th grade, and there was constant shame. There was very strict, rigid rules. Your dress code, how you treated individuals. And then some people were considered more privileged than others, and you were meant to make sure you complied to those things. And they would give out demerits if you didn't. You could be shamed in front of I've never been shamed in a public auditorium, but in a private auditorium, absolutely. They would just call out on people maybe if we had words to learn and somebody would just call it on
Mm,
space. If you didn't know it, you were, you had to stand up and be shamed in front of the whole class. There was a demerit
mm,
system. Just a lot of, I thought there was a lot of rigidity, and certainly money. Money certainly played into it. They certainly knew who the wealthy parents were.
mm,
And those kids got away with things, and we understood that they got away with things.
mm.
So it's more of a microcosm of the nastier parts of the wealth in America
Yeah.
kind of get played out in a private school.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all those things are kind of fair game for what could have kind of planted the blocks to your confidence in your subconscious. Um, so many things. Gosh, it's almost to even try to think of a list of common blocks to your subconscious is like overwhelming to me because there's so many different ways it can get in there, so many different things that it can kind of show up as for people, but it absolutely can influence behaviors, how you react to things, what you believe you're capable of. So it's just almost an all-encompassing kind of situation to think about what kinds of things are in the subconscious and can be blocking your, not just your confidence, but your ability to be successful in almost any aspect of life.
It's really interesting growing up. What I found and what I found from talking to other people is that there's so much of, while all of this is happening, all of these messages, and getting them more deeply ingrained into your subconscious. There's also the part where you're not supposed to talk about it.
Mhm.
There's the shaming of it all so that it stays inside, or what's your problem with that? Why? So there's shaming not only from teachers, but you have shaming from your social. If you
Mhm.
act just a little bit different from somebody else, you can have these looks. And so it's crazy that some of these subliminal messages can come from just you trying to fit into what's going on in culture and
Right.
not even realizing that it's there. And that's what's so beautiful about what you do.
Hmm. Well, and even I finally watched the Barbie movie a couple weeks ago
Oh, yeah.
because I saw that it was on, what was it, on Netflix or something, or I don't know what it was
Yeah,
on, some
something.
streaming service now. And it was interesting because it really was about female empowerment, and it pointed out, gosh, so much about the patriarchy and how even something as simple as a child's doll had such influence and such an opportunity to make girls feel like they're limited to only doing certain things or looking
Hmm.
certain ways. Um, it just, it's not overt. They weren't overtly saying, oh, you can only do this and you can only look this way. But just the implication of, oh, Barbie's beautiful and look how she's tall and skinny and has this kind of waistline and this kind of bust line. And, like that's the perfect ideal girl.
And
She's
that's all true.
blonde.
But when I was a kid, there were still rules and regulations. You had to be a certain height, certain weight, certain dimension around to be an airline stewardess. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, so back when I was a kid, when Barbie was around, you were kind of expected to look that way for some positions. So that
Yeah, for
thankfully
some,
has
absolutely.
changed. But yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
And
So
so in some ways it was like recognizing that there was Barbie and Skipper and I don't know, a few others. I never had actual Barbies myself, but there were several different female dolls and not nearly as many Ken dolls that would have driven what they were supposed to look like or do. It was sort of just an interesting take on that whole scene and how
mhm.
it influenced society.
Yeah, do you
So
like it?
that's yeah. Well, it was. It was. I mean, it's not something that I would run back and watch a bunch of times over and over again.
Right. Right.
Very campy and kind of cheesy humor, but
Yeah, no, it
for
was.
those messages, it was good. I think it was solid.
Well, I think it presented some ideas in a way that was more palatable for some people. So it
Right.
allowed some women to kind of wake up to the patriarchy and how things
Hmm.
weren't quite fair. And wow, can I really stand up for myself? Yes, you
Hmm.
can. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe not enough women of a certain demographic watched that before the election, but yeah, I
Mhm.
agree. That was sort of a message that was there for sure. Um, yeah, so that's an example of it could have been completely outside of your family influence. But if you had a Barbie doll and followed like what was expected of Barbie and all that good stuff, that was even influencing you
Mhm.
and making you feel less than or not confident in yourself if you didn't look like her,
And
right?
this is yeah, absolutely. And this is part of why it's so strong, right? This is part of why these subliminal messages can be so strong because they're
Right.
reinforced,
Yep.
right? They're
Yeah, that's one of the
reinforced for
biggest things is if the more you hear, I mean, repetition can be both beneficial and harmful. So when it's the repetition of what is kind of blocking you or reinforcing those barriers to your own confidence, then obviously that's not a great thing because the repetition makes it stronger. But you can use that same thing, as we'll talk about a little later, repetition of a different perspective to help turn the page and make things better. So yeah, reinforcement and hearing it from different perspectives or different people or just hearing it over and over again. That's why, commercials, especially these days, are a big influencer. You hear those commercials so often and it gets into your mind. And so you just, your subconscious kind of can't help but to start believing things that it's heard over and over and over again because it feels like, well, I keep hearing it, so there must be something to that. Um, but yeah, it's not just reinforcement in terms of like an abusive relationship with someone where they just keep putting you down. It can just be reinforcement of seeing the things around you. Like you said, it's one thing to start out with having Barbies when you're young. And then when you get older and see, oh, look, all the stewardesses or the flight attendants look a lot like a Barbie. They're that same kind of dimension, same kind of look. And oh, look, all the models look like Barbie too. Oh, look, all the, and then it gets reinforced in that way.
right. And then you think, oh, that's what I'm supposed to look like. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a big part of why it can be so strong. And you may not even notice that. You're just going about your business, flying on airplanes and watching TV and whatever, not realizing that that's getting reinforced is that, oh, this is what beautiful is. This is what successful looks like. This is what's attractive to people. And it just gets sort of silently reinforced. Um,
Mm.
there's, we talked a little earlier about how sometimes you can be aware of the things that are blocking you in your subconscious. Other times it can be hidden. One story that I'll share real quick that I thought was so interesting, and I share this with my clients sometimes, is the fact that I was watching the show with The Biggest Loser that was out years ago,
Mm.
where overweight people would come to what was sort of like a intense fat camp kind of thing, where they had, all
Yeah.
kinds of specialists, nutritionists, and personal trainers and stuff like that working with them to help them lose massive amount of weights in a short period of time for the purpose of TV and drama. But there was one particular episode. I didn't watch it on a regular basis. I just remember tuning in and watching part of one episode where they had the contestants pulling a sled of various amounts of weight. Each contestant had their own weight that they had to pull around a track or something. They were at like a track and field type of situation.
Mhm.
And the contestants were having such a hard time pulling these sleds. They're like, this has got to be the wrong sled for me. This is too much weight. I can't pull it. And what they revealed to them at the end of that exercise was, this is the amount of weight that you've lost since you've been here.
Wow. So they
Which
had been carrying it around.
exactly. And didn't
Yeah.
even realize how heavy it was until they were able to be without it and then try to pick up that weight again. It was like, Can't do it.
Wow.
So, that's a kind of a physical example of that. But the same kind of thing happens even emotionally with people, is they don't realize how, things like depression and anxiety, they don't even recognize until they can get past it, just how heavy it was or just how much it was holding them back.
Yeah, when we had talked about this, we had talked about something that had happened to me. I was in my 40s when I met my wife, and she was like, "You never wear shorts." I'm like, yeah. I'm just not a fan of my legs. And she's like, "Why? There's nothing wrong with your legs." And I had such shame about my legs, and I just didn't even realize I wasn't wearing shorts. I mean, I just knew I didn't like them. I didn't like shorts. That's what I told her. I said, "I don't like shorts."
Mm-hmm.
It had nothing to do with liking shorts. I didn't like my legs. I didn't like anybody looking at them, paying attention to them. And as we kind of got down to the basis of what in the world you need to wear, we live at the beach, you need to wear some shorts.
Right.
And so I really gave a deep dive into it. And I remembered two instances. One where my dad, I had said something about how beautiful, not Beyonce. Beyonce was not around when I was a little kid. Yeah. Whitney Houston. It was Whitney Houston. I was talking about how beautiful Whitney Houston was. And my dad took his hand and he kind of slapped me on my leg. And then he grabbed my thigh and he says, "You know what, sweetie?" And he's like jiggling my leg and he says, "You're no Whitney Houston." Thanks,
Yep.
Dad. And the other thing that happened was I was in school and sitting in class, biology class. I still remember the room, Mrs. Blossom. And one of the guys in front of me, really cute, not anybody I was interested in, but really cute. And he reaches back his hand, and I hadn't shaved. Actually, I don't think I had ever shaved. I was, I was just hairy.
Mm-hmm.
And he reached back and he was like, "Ew," and told everybody about my gorilla legs. And I shaved from that point on and tried to hide them as much as possible. That upon my along with my dad, I had this shame complex around my legs, and every once in a while it'll still rear its head. But yeah, I wear shorts all the time now. It's just not the same. But every time I lose weight, I still struggle with it. So as I lose more weight, I'll struggle with my legs and showing my legs and have to work through it each time. It's fascinating.
Yeah, that's actually a good example of how it can be somewhat hidden or surprising that there's a limitation or a boundary there. I remember having a client several years ago who came in for weight loss. And one of the things that we uncovered in our work together was that she had a subconscious block to losing weight because when she had been thin before, she was getting a lot of unwanted attention from men, like being, catcally and gropey and stuff like that. And it made her uncomfortable. And so subconscious protection is, all right, don't let her get thin like that again. It happens a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Those things can come from all over the place. So do we want to go ahead and I can pop up the Epic Envisioning?
Yeah, actually, I was gonna do that right now before we get into the third step.
Okay.
Are you tired of chasing dreams that never seem to materialize? Have you tried things like vision boards or just writing your goals on Post-it notes and leaving them around the house, but still not getting what you really want? It's time to engage your subconscious superpowers and take control of your future. An Epic Envisioning workshop will help you gain clarity on your goals, develop actionable steps to achieve them, and overcome obstacles and stay motivated. Join us and discover the power of intentional living. Transform your vision and dreams into reality. Go to hypnohuddle.com to see which workshop works best for you and register today. Take the first step toward one of the best investments you'll ever make. You deserve this.
And if you don't know, I'm a huge supporter of Jenny, and this epic envisioning is fantastic. I love her hypnosis
Recordings.
recordings. See, I caught myself before I said it.
You did.
I keep calling it tapes. I did good.
Which is,
all right. So
if nothing else is proof that Beyonce was not around when we were kids. It's calling music tapes because pretty sure she's never been on a cassette tape.
God, that is hilarious. Oh my gosh. Okay, so how do we overcome these blocks, Jenny? Aside from
Yes.
your epic envisioning, what can we do?
Right. Yeah. Well, and let me point out, sometimes these blocks are things that they come up, or we want to get past them because they've created some sort of bad habit, or we feel stuck in some kind of negative aspect of our life. And so it's like we're trying to get out of something, but it's not always that way. It's not just about feeling like, well, I'm doing something different or wrong from what I should be doing. I need to get myself out of it. Sometimes it's just knowing, hey, I'm doing okay, but gosh, it sure seems like I could be doing like gangbusters. I could be doing so much better. Why am I not there? Why am I, like here instead of here? So it can either be to kind of dig yourself out of what you feel as a whole, or it can be to get yourself off the ground and get you into an even better position, soaring, above kind of the normal range. But absolutely, one of the things that can be helpful in overcoming these blocks is to become aware of them. So there's multiple ways of kind of figuring out what your blocks are. But certainly hypnotherapy is a great way to do it. If you've thought about it, if you tried to figure it out on your own and you just like feel like you're knocking your head against a wall and nothing's coming up, hypnotherapy can get past all of that conscious protection that is trying to kind of keep us safe from diving down to figure out what's going on behind the curtain. And it just brings the information up as you're in hypnosis. So hypnotherapy is a great way to really become more efficient about figuring out what those blocks are and then dealing with them. It can be done without hypnosis or some related technique, but hypnosis and hypnotherapy really tends to get you there quicker. So sometimes it's even helpful to talk to friends or family members and get feedback from them on if they can see something, if they can kind of give you an idea of what they feel might be your subconscious block. And you wouldn't even have to put it that way, but like, what do you think is holding me back? You know what I mean? People with an objective perspective that know you can usually give you some good feedback on that.
And for those of you that have maybe aren't afraid to dabble around with AI, AI is a fabulous tool for this. I've been talking to AI for quite some time now, and I can go in there and say, hey, I'm feeling stuck about this and this. Could you put your therapist hat on, your hypnotherapist hat on, your I don't know, your spirituality hat on, and talk to me about this, or tell me what you think I don't see. And you'd be amazed at how, depending on how long you've been talking with ChatGPT, you'd be amazed at what it can tell you and what it can reveal to you, especially if you're ready to hear it.
Right. Yeah. And so it can be helpful. You don't always have to identify exactly what the issue is before you can start to work on it, but it certainly can be helpful. And there's been times I know when I've worked with clients where even just in coming in for their first session and talking to me, kind of sharing what they're wanting to work on or improve, when they leave, they're like, wow, I'm starting to feel better already. Because like you've connected some dots that I wasn't able to connect on my own. So sometimes it is helpful just to be aware of it. Once you get it out into the open, where you can see it and understand what it is, it's certainly much easier to figure out what to do about it. Sometimes then you can kind of take care of it on your own. Sometimes you still need a little help or support with that. And so one of the ways of helping overcome something like that is what we've talked about previously, is kind of building up the validation list, or
Mm-hmm.
reviewing the things that you have accomplished in your life that you've been successful with, especially when it comes to, anything that might be blocking your confidence. Show it how it's wrong. Look at all the
Yeah.
things I've done.
And one thing that I forgot about, we were just recently talking about this, is that you can have a validation list, but you can also look every day. If you have an objective to look every day for validation for the things you want, you'll be amazed at how much that will be reinforced once you're looking for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. You just reminded me of this I think on Monday, you reminded me of that. And I thought, wow, I need to start looking again for the validation of, the universe doing good in my favor, God, whatever it is that you choose. But looking for that evidence. And when you do, you'll amaze at how much you see and how much more you see as you make it a practice.
Mm-hmm. And this is why having like a gratitude list or gratitude practice on a daily basis can be a great tool to get you on that path of confidence or believing in what it is that you're trying to achieve or do. And a lot of people, there's a bunch of different ways of doing a gratitude practice. So that's something you can look into and find what feels most comfortable for you in terms of how to do that, whether it's daily or weekly, whether you write it down or speak it out or however you want to do it. Lots of different ways to do that. So, so those are things that are fairly straightforward, do it yourself kind of thing. Coming up with a validation list, doing a gratitude practice. Those are things that will absolutely help get you on the right path or headed in the right direction when it comes to overcoming whatever's been holding you back. But certainly there's science now behind being able to alter your mind and what you're focusing on and thinking about and how you're behaving or reacting to things. Neuroplasticity is one thing. Oh, and I forgot to bring up to have like a specific actual definition of that. So let me try to get that up so that we're clear on what we're talking about. So neuroplasticity is defined as the ability of the nervous system to change its activity in response to intrinsic or extrinsic stimuli by reorganizing its structure, functions, or connections. And this can even be done after things that are like physical injuries. It doesn't have to be a physical injury to apply neuroplasticity, but the fact that even if something is either chemically or physically altered, like by an accident or something, you can create new pathways in the mind. You can create different kind of reactions from a chemical perspective. It is possible. And that's one of the beautiful things really about our mind, and the fact that it's not necessarily something that's like other parts of our body where, oh, okay, well, your knee's feeling bad. Let's just go in and operate on it and like fix something physically about your knee. And okay, now it's better. The mind is such a kind of a fluid thing that it doesn't typically take some kind of physical thing to go in and like change something about the mind for it to actually be able to change the way it's functioning.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that you can actually reprogram your subconscious. I actually did that before knowing you. I didn't know if I completely believed it when I was doing it. That you really could do it. You know how skeptical I was when we first met. I was curious. I was curious, but I was very skeptical.
As was I the first time, before I started doing it. I was an engineer, for God's sakes.
Yeah,
Didn't seem
right?
very scientific to me.
And so going from something really grounded to something that has always been called woo-woo, we should do an episode about why this is considered woo-woo, why it was has been looked at so negatively all of these years. And we could do a whole episode about that. That's be fascinating.
Sure.
But reprogramming your subconscious, I didn't know when I started, because I did this thing called 27-month experiment where I tried to change my subconscious. Let's listen to hypnosis tapes, one of them from Jenny and some other subliminals. And what's crazy to me is that totally works. You can totally brainwash yourself, and for good. And one of the things that I didn't understand, and I found out I found out 3 years later after I did this, is that narcissism, like I had a lot of narcissism in my life, and that narcissism can actually chemically alter your brain. And it came out, and maybe this will help somebody, because for whatever reason it keeps going, talk about this, which is when I started menopause. It felt like I was losing my mind. Absolutely felt like I was losing my mind. And what I found out is that during menopause, that's the time when all of the masks that you've been trying to hold up, and the effects from narcissism and trying to be the good girl all these years, that during menopause, it makes it incredibly difficult to hold all the masks up. They just all start falling down. They all start falling apart. And I felt like I was losing my mind. And so much of it was that I had things that would work perfectly. So I knew how to make things just perfect. Remember perfectionism, and I thought I had taken a lot of these masks down, but during menopause, I realized I had not. As they started falling down, I was having a difficult time with my neuroplasticity. I was very rigid at that moment. I was scared, kind of like a deer in the headlights, and my nervous system felt completely overwhelmed. And that's when I started bringing somatics into helping, to help to calm my nervous system so that I could work on my neuroplasticity, so I could work on my reactions to things, so that I would have time to process information rather than reacting to it, which doesn't help anybody. That is not positive when you're reactionary like that. It just doesn't help anybody. So
Right.
just a little tidbit for those of you that have narcissists in your life.
Yeah. Well, and it's a hopeful note too, right? That you can, even though they can alter your brain chemistry when you're exposed to them, or before you realize what's going on, you're able to then re-alter it or change it in a new and different way, so that you're not for the rest of your life affected by that narcissist and how they're reacting.
And the crazy thing is that if you heal yourself enough, because at first I was just like, I just need to stay away from this person. And then I got to a place of gratitude for him. I got into a place of gratitude for the narcissist in my life and for the narcissists in my life. I became grateful for them. And because they've helped me to heal by their triggers, I was able to see where I still needed to heal. And it was very freeing. It was absolutely freeing to know that, okay, this doesn't have control over me anymore. I'm okay.
Right.
I don't have any desire to go spend time with them, but I love that they were put in my life. But I also don't need to be around this person anymore. That I felt was the final lesson. Could I be around that person? Sure, I've learned a lot, but yeah, you don't have to either. And so that's, for me, I've always looked at forgiveness as something you had to do for other people. You can also do it for you.
Absolutely.
And release all of it. Just release it. I don't have any animosity towards them anymore.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
But that's because of this work.
And before you do that releasing and forgiveness, there can still be a lot of rigidity. So the neuroplasticity certainly isn't complete if you haven't been able to get to that point of releasing and forgiving. Sometimes the release needs to be an emotional release. Sometimes it's just about, it can even, for some of my clients, it really has even a physical component to it. Sometimes it's just they feel lighter after releasing an attachment to something, that kind of caused their suffering to some extent. Sometimes it's a physical change in how they feel in their body. They may have like a tightness in their chest when we first start talking about the situation. And once they've released it and gone through some forgiveness work, like they don't feel a tightness in their chest anymore. It's just, there's so many things that it can even show up physically for you. And it can lead to what I would call dis-ease. So some physical diseases that people get can be rooted in these kind of stressors that just haven't been sorted out.
Crazy. It's just crazy. It's all of the things that we have come to rely upon in our life are actually not good for us, and that we need to go back to connecting with earth, connecting with ourselves, eating non-processed foods, and just going back to the natural way that our community. Oh my gosh, I think that's one of the biggest travesties over the last 50 years is losing our communities. Just the way our roads are built. Okay, I'm going off topic here. Well, let's go back to you. So sorry.
Yeah, it's not exactly related to neuroplasticity.
No. Let's get back to you. Let's go ahead and finish you up. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. Yeah. So, some of the different ways, since we mentioned hypnotherapy specifically and how we were going to talk about these subconscious barriers and to confidence and things like that. So some of the ways that hypnotherapy can help with that. One of the main protocols that I use with clients is what's called suggestion therapy. And that's really where it comes into repeating. There's a recording that I do for them where it's repeating hypnotic suggestions based on whatever it is that we determine their subconscious needs to hear to be able to sort of flip the switch or start behaving or responding differently. So a lot of repetition, a lot of imagery is involved in that suggestion therapy. That's usually what I start clients with. It's like planting new seeds of thought, where the old seeds are, we're trying to pluck the old seeds out. The second major protocol that I usually do with clients is really to address any subconscious self-sabotage, because sometimes there are parts of our subconscious that still feel like they're helping us or protecting us in some way by keeping things the way we've been used to. Like, this has always worked. Don't change. It works. But the problem is there's parts of the subconscious that don't really see the big picture or don't realize that by doing things that way, now that's causing some negative side effects or ripple effects. So it doesn't really work. It's working for maybe a little millisecond, kind of like, for emotional eating is a good example that a lot of people can relate to. Probably the vast majority of people that have an emotional eating issue, it's because when they were little and they didn't feel good, they went to mom, she gave them a cookie or, a sucker or some kind of sweet. And so that's what got trained into the subconscious is if you don't feel good, you eat something sweet, you feel better. And so while that may have worked when you were young, as you're an adult, you
not necessarily the best thing for you.
Right. And you are no longer limited to what mom gives you out of the pantry. You can do something for yourself. You can listen to your favorite song, or you can go take a walk on the beach, or, you can do something that makes you happy beyond just what mom gave you to do when she was busy doing other stuff. So there's a lot of really cool things that can come out of trying to work through that subconscious self-sabotage. And then the third main protocol that I do with clients quite often is regression protocol. And that's really about just seeing, where is there an emotional energy leak back in the timeline of your life that's still kind of fueling the flames of this behavior or this way of thinking, this limited thought or belief in yourself, so that we can figure out how to quench that leak or, tape it off, figure out how to take care of what happened way back then that planted that seed or that created the potential for the behavior that you're dealing with today, and kind of nip it at the bud, so to speak. So several different ways. And there's more iterations of those protocols, but those are kind of the main three techniques that I use with people on a pretty regular basis to help them shift past the limitations of the subconscious blocks and how it can affect their confidence. So it's a really powerful tool to help people in so many different ways, deal with issues across the board.
Awesome. And it sounds like that's almost it's a deeper level than because it's spending time with you and you doing this regression therapy. So that's like a deeper level with you, correct?
Well, you don't necessarily need a real deep level of hypnosis to do that kind of work, but it is one-on-one work. It's not something that can really be done in a group setting. There's plenty of people that have gotten the suggestion therapy that is associated with hypnotherapy, like for stop smoking. Like, oh, I went to this group session and we all sat in a room and they played a recording for us and we all walked out and didn't smoke. Okay. But if you start smoking again in a week because somebody triggered you, you probably want to come in and do one of those other protocols on a one-on-one basis so that we can figure out what's going on that made it come back.
Awesome. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much. And we talked very briefly about needing community. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Power Voice group that we have going on. Excuse me. And Jenny's a part of that as well. You have spent your life making sure that everyone else is comfortable. Keeping the peace, dimming your power. But this truly is a critical time. I don't need to tell you. If you've been listening to this show, I don't need to tell you. This is a very critical time, and you know it. Our voices need to be heard. And you've always felt that there's something you're meant to do. Now, if this resonates with you, if you know that you have something to share and you haven't been doing it, then the mind shift is for you. This is where we're going to strip off your mask. Well, you're going to do it. I'm just going to help you do it. Strip off your mask, break nice girl conditioning, the nice girl training that you've had, and start living unapologetically. And if you're ready to go even deeper into healing, collective power, and real freedom, then there's the awakening. But first, you have to step through the door. So you can apply now at DeirdreBeacham.com. Let me put it up here real quick. I should have had that on there through the whole thing. But you can go to DeirdreBeacham.com. Okay? So that's the end of my commercial. Let's see, what else do we have here? Next week, do you want to talk about what we're doing next week?
Next week, we're going to talk about building unshakable confidence.
Yes. Yeah, and that's really important. And we're going to keep touching on the fact that, your voice does need to be heard. It's not just our voices. Your voice needs to be heard too. So we just want to help you to break through those shackles that keep you leashed so that it keeps you quiet, because this is not a time to be quiet. This is not a time to shrink as much as it feels like you should be shrinking or freaking out. This is not the time to do that. It's the time to get resolved, heal, and move forward and have a voice. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe, follow, share. If you have a topic or a question, or you want to be a guest. We don't have a lot of guests, but we might be swayed. Visit us at unleashedafpodcast.com. Go to WWJDD. What would Jenny and Deidre do? We would love to hear from you. You have anything else, Jenny?
The only thing I wanted to mention, based on what we were saying there at the end, is that, we talked earlier about how TikTok is shifting and things like that, so we're not sure exactly how that's going to potentially change our landscape where we're trying to reach people. But also the thing that's impressive is how much power people have. You mentioned, and I don't think we shared it on the live podcast, we were talking right before we started about how much of an influence TikTok users had even on things in the stock market. So it's
it's been crazy, the amount of power that is the amount of people that have come together as a community and said, hey, this isn't fair, this isn't right, let's do something about it. And they're affecting people's wallets. And I really think that's the biggest reason why TikTok has been, the government's trying to take TikTok down, is because people have organized. I mean, just look at all the people that jumped over to Red Note and said, look, we're not happy. You're trying to get rid of this. You're saying it's this. Well, then we're going to do this. And pulling down Kellogg stock prices, pull down Meta's stock prices. There are thousands, I don't know if it's hundreds of thousands yet, but there are literally thousands and thousands of people leaving Meta right now. They're leaving Instagram and they're leaving Facebook in solidarity against fascism, because it seems that Zuckerberg has just tipped his hat in and just jumped in full force with the incoming regime. I can't even call it a presidency. And so it's not a time to go crazy. But we need to stand up with each other and for each other. And so Jenny and I are going to be talking about that. And we don't know what's going to happen.
And it would be interesting to hear from our listeners as to where they plan to be, where they'd like to be fed, basically. Where would you like to continue to see the podcast?
Yeah, because we have it on YouTube, and we're going to look at some other places to put it. And of course, have it streamed. But if for the videos themselves, we would like to know where else you'd like to see us. Awesome.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And we hope that you have how about a fabulous, unleashed week. Take care. I can't find the outro.
I'm done trying to live up to others' expectations. Family, society, class, race, sex, or religions. It's time to break free from the isms that make us